It's all good, magic, mysticism, and earth medicine. Check us out by visiting www.magicandmedicine.blogspot.com. I'm your host, Dr. Candace Nadine Green.
Hello, everyone, and thank you for joining us today for another episode of It's All Good, Magic, Mysticism, and Earth Medicine. Here I am, your mystic queen, Dr. Candace Nadine Breen. Before we hop into today's interview, I'd like to just do a little housekeeping and a few announcements. Thank you always for all the new listeners and people who join us up on Podbean. But remember, check us out also on Patreon if you'd like to keep this show running. Just $1 a month to help us keep the show running, because I cannot do it all by myself. To keep the lights on, keep us getting hosts and paying for our recording gear, etc. That would be helpful. All it takes is simply $1 a month. Honestly, $1 a month. We're not asking for 10, we're not asking for 20, just $1. So if you like hearing us and you want to keep us on the air, why don't you just consider giving back to what you already listened to? And participate and read our articles that are on the blog, on the website at magic, MAGICK, and medicine.blogspot.com. Check us out on Facebook. We're on there as well. Feel free to post, feel free to ask questions, all those good things. This is your community, and we'd love so much for you to be engaged in it, to participate in it. So please help us, help you. All right, now that I'm off my soapbox, let's talk a little bit about the interview that you're going to hear. So not long ago, I interviewed Sarah Main. She wrote this wonderful book called Conscious Confidence, and it's an awesome book. And I mean, it's not witchy or pagan per se, but I love the ideas in it that help us. She talks a lot about how we could use Sanskrit, which I always thought was very intimidating, Sanskrit, but how we can use Sanskrit to utilize it in practicing self-awareness, meditation, all of that. So for her whole life, Sarah has centered around studying, practicing, and teaching this higher consciousness and self-awareness. In 1971, at the age of 10, she began her spiritual journey. She was introduced to mantra meditation and other spiritual disciplines and techniques. And by the time she was 13, she was studying Sanskrit. And in her early 20s, she was teaching this practical self-awareness, philosophy, meditation, and Sanskrit to both children and adults. She shares with us during the interview, you hear her talk about this awesome relationship she had with her parents and how open-minded they were. It's just a beautiful, wonderful story, and I really hope you enjoy it. For decades, Sarah Main continued to deepen her understanding and experience of consciousness while engaged with the practical world of family and work. A few years ago, seeing a need in the world, she was inspired to take all she had learned and reformulate it into a simple, enjoyable, and practical program of conscious confidence. Now, since then, Sarah has expanded her conscious confidence program into a full-length book, of which I have a copy, and you should get one too. And she has coached individual clients and has presented her ideas to group seminars and business owners. I will put all of her contact information in the show notes, but in the meantime, you can check her out by visiting consciousconfidence.com. That's consciousconfidence.com. I hope you enjoy this episode. Now let's get on to it. Hey, Sarah, welcome to the show. It's so great to have you.
Thanks for having me along. It's lovely to be here.
Now, I've been looking at your book here, Conscious Confidence. Can you just briefly, tell us why conscious confidence? What does it have to do with us, basically, today?
Well, why conscious confidence? It happened a few years ago, actually. I just became aware in my coaching work, and also I was involved in some music, and I was at a workshop, and a whole lot of musicians, particularly orchestral musicians and harpists, were talking about their issues with performance anxiety. And people were talking about how it's common these days to take medication to deal with their performance nerves. And also I was aware of a shift in the issues that my coaching clients were bringing to me. And it just set me thinking about this whole area of anxiety and worry and lack of security, inner security, that people seem to be really bothered about now. It's a thing. And so I started looking into it. And one thing led to another. It was a series of steps. I thought, what is actually happening when you feel confident within yourself? And as soon as I asked that question, I thought, go back to the Sanskrit, because that's my background. Mm-hmm. So I started looking up the Sanskrit for confidence, and I discovered Sanskrit had 12 words for confidence. Mm. And yeah, not just 1, 12. Wow. I mean, that's the nature of Sanskrit. It's thorough, it's precise. Wow. And it tells you what's happening. It's not conceptual meaning, it tells you what's happening and what you need to do. And so when I started looking up that, it's just like the lights went on in my mind. I thought, oh, right, okay, yes, bing, bing. And that's how it really started. Mm. And then the term conscious confidence, literally it was given. It came to me.
That's awesome. You talk about anxiety. So many people have anxiety. I myself, and they get these diagnoses as being, PTSD and acute anxiety, all those things. And this, right away, what therapists and doctors want to do is medicate people. Yeah. Just give them medicine, which is not, it's not really solving the issue.
Yes. that was really
it's just putting a Band-Aid on it and helping, the feelings associated with it sort of go away, but it's really not helping that person. It's not the medicine that they need. And so it's interesting that you've come up with this conscious confidence. Now, how do you think people can use this to apply this conscious, what you talk about, the Sanskrit? What if they don't know Sanskrit? How can they apply it to their lives? How does this book help them?
It's a great question. Number one, you don't need to learn Sanskrit.
Hooray. I look at it and I
you think, forget it, it's not me. Sanskrit is a beautiful language. Yeah. There's much to say about Sanskrit, but it's not about learning Sanskrit. It's about getting the wisdom that's in Sanskrit. Mm-hmm. And there's a difference. You can learn the language. Wonderful. It's magnificent, and I've studied it and I love it. Mm. But that's my thing. But it's the wisdom that's in Sanskrit, and it's taking this timeless wisdom. I wouldn't even say it's ancient, because ancient makes it seem like way back when in the past. Right. This is timeless. This is for all time. And it's universal. And universal means it's applicable at all times, in all places, in all situations. If that's not the case, excuse me, then it's not universal. So it's taking this universal timeless wisdom and applying it. Now, in my book, I've actually, each section, there are practices, there are things you can do to take this into your experience. There's simple practices. There's simple, excuse me, I've got a frog in my throat. There's simple exercises that you make it practical. So it's taking that wisdom and making it practical in your life, in your experience.
Now, why, and I don't mean to like be a pain in the neck, why Sanskrit? You know, I mean, why would someone want to, what would make them bite, bite in regards to
Yes.
this book? Because you say Sanskrit. See, because when I first, had your book and I said, oh no, Sanskrit, it's so complicated. And I'm probably not the only one to say, why Sanskrit? So what's the pull? What's the pull, the reader in regards to Sanskrit? Language of the universe and all that. Why?
Yeah, well, you said it, language of the universe. The word Sanskrita, which is the Sanskrit word for Sanskrit, means pure and perfectly formed. Wow. And that and the language itself is unchanged. So that means it's pure and perfectly formed, and what it contains, the energy of it, the wisdom of it, is untouched and it's unchanged, it's intact. And the why Sanskrit is, if you actually really want wisdom, actual wisdom, and remember, Sanskrit means pure and perfectly formed, you go back to something like Sanskrit. If you want source wisdom, SOURCE, wisdom, you need to go back to the real sources, and Sanskrit is a real source. It's not just sort of a latest fad, something someone's just come up with that may or may not work. This works, right? This stands the test of time. It's whole, complete, pure and perfect. And the language itself brings with it the experience of the meaning. It's not just a concept that you then go and experience or figure out, or I don't know, it's not conceptual, it's the meaning is experiential. And not everybody knows that about Sanskrit. They just think of it as an old complex language that other people study. I'm not saying study Sanskrit. I'm saying go back to what the wisdom says, and that's what I've presented, because I felt we needed to go back to the depths of the source wisdom about confidence, what's really going on, because there's lots of people talking about, do this to make you confident, do that to make you confident, and it works to a point, but I'm talking about confidence that's deeply rooted within yourself. It's not situational, it's not dependent on the situation being a certain way, it's what you just bring with yourself to any situation. And then you've got a possibility of being open and thriving in your life, rather than having to have everything a certain way, or just having this slight sense of worry that something terrible is going to happen, or whatever it is.
The more I talk to people, the more the answer to all our problems is the same. Go back. It's always go back to the source, the roots, connect with the earth, the universe. The answer is within. You have to find it. It's all the same message, which is so simple but yet so complex, because we've had, society has tried to make all of these ideas that we say, they call it New Age, which I don't even like that name, because it's not new. It's not new at all. And it's all the same message. When we have these problems, and not to medicate it with prescription drugs or things. I mean, they may help some people, that's fine, but it doesn't really help deal with the problem. In order to solve the problem, we have to go back. It's always the same message, go back. And it's so simple, but we're so bombarded with all of the stuff of our modern world and technology that we don't accept it. And I think there's not an increase in, well, there could, I don't know. Well, there's a lot of people with anxiety. I think and it's because of this world that we live in. Run, go, make that money, stress. And I mean, I was going to ask you, what do you think people are anxious, but I guess I kind of blew that question. But but that's what I think. People, it's the way we are living today that is really stressing a lot of us out. I mean, it's always go. We don't stop and take into account our own well-being. And it's sad. It's sad. So, you've had some spiritual teachers you talk about.
Yes.
Which I think is so important. Has any of them taught you something that's really, really, that sticks out? What have you learned from your spiritual teachers?
Oh, wow. How long have you got? Everything. Whoa. Look, I started this young. Gosh, as you can see, I really, so much, everything really, everything of any actual importance, But if there's one thing, really one thing, it is this connection with yourself. It is who you really are. And that's not a concept, that's who you are. And it's not something you take for granted. And being taught and shown what the wisdom traditions, the timeless ancient wisdom traditions say about who you really are. As I go on, I realise that the wisdom traditions have our back. They have your back because the wisdom traditions express and have been saying this for all time to all humanity, who you really are. They know who we really are. And they keep reminding us of who we really are. So when we feel lost, like you were saying about all the stress that people live with, and we run around doing all these things and we don't remember who we really are. It doesn't mean it means that when you're at home looking after your family or at work, you're not disconnected from who you really are. And that is profound. That is the anchor, the basis of everything.
And, this is maybe kind of silly, but when you said who you really are, I thought of the Disney movie Moana, and how, I don't know if I have kids, so that's why I watched it. And there's a part, a point in in the film where the Moana's grandmother tells her to be who you really are, who you really are. And it's very interesting because anytime someone says that, it's about connecting with their ancestors, with the source, and it's about going back. And for her, it was the same thing. It was finding who she really was deep down inside, and it was connecting with the earth, because she helps save her people, and all that. She connecting with the earth, and she meets a demigod and all this stuff on the way who she helps. And it was interesting because she had to, the connection was already there. The possibility of connection was there. She just had to find it and make that connection. So when you said who you really are, I just thought of that film in particular, but that's another recurring message in films, books, and everything, finding out who you really are.
Yes, and the wisdom traditions lead us to we are who we are. Actually, we just forget. It gets covered over like the clouds cover over the sun, and it seems like the sun isn't there. We are who we are, and this is a connection even beyond ancestors and our personality that forms an element of who we are as people would recognise and as we would recognise. But it's that experience of presence, that I amness, that's often spoken about in the wisdom traditions, and that's a sense of presence. And it's funny, it's right under our nose. It's the most immediate thing. It's there the second we wake up to when we go to bed. If we get on an airplane and fly over to the other side of the world, we take ourselves with us. Right. When we get off that plane, we're there because we take that with us. We don't leave it back home when we go in a plane. But it's the one thing that can get forgotten instantly. And the mind, the chattering mind that we're all so familiar with, that can aid in this forgetting of who we are and this covering over of who we are, because it gets active and it says, it just basically discounts this as being unimportant because it's outward looking, and we need to actually be quiet and still and just connect with our presence of who we are right now, right here. And that's the start.
And the idea of this self-awareness has been, now we have a vocabulary for it, but it's been around forever. Forever. Along with meditation and mindfulness. It's just that now we have words for them.
Yeah.
And
well, go on.
Go ahead. I just wanted to ask you, what do you think about these ideas, meditation, self-awareness, and mindfulness, even though they've been around forever?
Well, as you say, that they have been around forever, because these wisdom traditions are timeless, and they have been keeping this knowledge alive, keeping this knowledge present for humanity, so we don't forget who we are. And that's a great service. But when I started my spiritual journey, I was 10 years old, and that was back in 1971. And the words mindfulness, they didn't exist. They weren't they're common currency now. You can get an app on your phone, no problem. Error mindfulness, oh yeah, sure. But back then it didn't exist. Meditation was, that was a word, but no one meditated, or that was what some guru did, or the Beatles were meditating or something like that. Right. My parents started meditating in the late 60s, and this is just an ordinary suburban couple, but they were searching and they discovered meditation. And that was unusual, and no one spoke about it. They didn't go around saying, hey, we meditate. Like everybody these days, you can talk about meditation, no problem. But every second person's meditating in some form or another. But in those days, it was unusual, and I could tell Mum and Dad were onto something. Like I was 10, and I could hear them discussing things enthusiastically, and they had really found something, and they meditated every day. My dad put on a suit and went and worked in an office. It was not like he wore caftans or anything. Not that there's anything wrong with caftans. I'm talking absolute. I want to paint a picture of absolutely normal suburban living. Like we went to school, we just did normal stuff. But Mum and Dad meditated in the morning and the evening, and they were studying this wisdom, this knowledge now, and they had found it. And I could tell like this was different. And when I went to play at my friends' places, like I was a 10-year-old, 11-year-old kid, I'd go and play in someone else's house or something. Their parents weren't talking in this way. Mum and Dad were. It was just a different energy, and I wanted that. I was like so interested. And so I started studying. I went to practical philosophy classes that they'd found. And then when I was offered meditation, I said, yep, I'll have that, thanks. And it's just started like that. But that was unusual. Trust me, I did not go to school every day. And I was just finishing elementary school at 10. And then by 12 and 13, I was going off to high school. Wow. Because we do high school from 12 to 18. Oh. I know you name your schooling slightly differently from us. Trust me, I did not go to school saying, hey, I'm learning about meditation. I'm studying Sanskrit. I didn't. You just didn't talk about it because, the weirdness alert, warning, would go off. Right. So I had these sort of two experiences. But the wisdom and the presence and, what is common currency now, that made so much sense to me. And it didn't mean I didn't experience what teenagers go through, but I just have these resources, at my disposal. I could remember something, some wisdom. I could fall still. I knew how to do that. I knew how to let things go. And as I've got on as an adult, I thought, boy, oh boy, is that ever the most powerful thing you could ever teach someone? And I just took that for granted. But I could also see, like, my friends at school struggle with issues, and they didn't have the resources that I had.
Yeah. So, not to cut you off, but I mean, that transition from high school to adulthood is so difficult for a lot of people. It was for me, I know. What do you think? I mean, I mean, you said you had all of this to help you, but a lot of your peers, I'm sure, did not. Their parents weren't meditating and reading wisdom text and things like that.
Yeah.
Why do you think that we have such a hard time transitioning from high school to, adulthood? Why is it so hard?
Well, look, it really comes back to that fundamental issue of a lack of connection with self-awareness, with who you are. That is your starting point for everything. And we're born with it naturally, but it gets covered over by the time we're sort of in high school and in adulthood. It's getting covered over, and especially these days, the noise, the inner noise gets very loud. So that's the first, really, the fundamental part of the question is getting back to the real roots in ourselves. It's like a plant. If you look at a plant and it's not healthy and thriving, you know, in terms of gardening, that there's something wrong with the root, with the soil root, and you will address those issues at that point. But we don't often look at a person and say, okay, they're struggling, there's something, the actual root is not strong within themselves. We'll try and fix it at the surface. So that's number one. And number two, part of that connection is really proper wisdom, real wisdom, and learning how to apply that. And it doesn't mean you're not going to go through the experiences of that time in your life. I mean, the teenage years are the teenage years.
Oh, yes.
There are certain factors to that. It doesn't just take them all away, but it's what you have to draw on and connect with that makes all the difference. And if you have wisdom, and this is wisdom that stood the test of time, that really works, then you don't have anything in your kit bag. You know, you're left on your own. And when I say the wisdom traditions have your back, they really, really do. Yeah. The wisdom traditions believe in us better than we ever believe in ourselves. I can tell you that, because they know who we really are.
And, I remember my time transitioning, which was kind of difficult. That point when college was over, I finished college and I had to be an adult. I was a teacher, an English teacher after college. And I was thrown in with all these other adults who were older than I, more experienced than I. And at first it was a little scary. It was scary trying to find out who I was. And I had to sort of put this cloak on. I had to be a different person. Because in college and stuff, I was, they called me eccentric, but just because I meditated and I wrote a lot and I reflected a lot about things. And I realized when I got out into into society, working professionally, that it wasn't okay. The way that I was, who I was not acceptable. And that's what a lot of young people deal with when they go into the workforce or have to be an adult. It's being rejected for who they are, and it's hard. And that's what makes a lot of people go through, they get depressed because then they don't find a place where they could, quote unquote, fit in, be like everyone else. They don't confine to a certain a form that society has picked out for them. And it causes a lot of depression, which leads to other things that are unhealthy. And having a plan, having some resources, I think would change that. And you have this Fuse program in your book that you talk about, and I want to talk about that a little bit. What is it, basically?
What's the Fuse program?
What is it, and how does it help? How can it help, especially the young people, people be who they are and be consciously confident in society?
Yeah, well, it's getting back to those roots. And when I say who you really are, that starts before what we recognize as our personality and our, characteristics and all of that. That's one level. But actually, you can get behind that, which is that sense of I amness. You need your connection in that being, in that presence. And that is subtle. But it's there, and it's what we take with us, it's what we have with us, and at every moment of the day, it gets covered over by our experiences, which are outward looking. So that said, the Fuse program, there's 6 elements to it. And it starts with core values, then a positive attitude, then focusing, uniting, simplifying, and energizing. So the Fuse part comes from focusing, F, uniting, U, simplifying, S, and energizing, E, F-U-S-E. And those 6 elements allow you to have that fundamental connection, and that then you can take into any situation. And God willing, you don't have to feel that you have to compromise who you are, and you don't have to feel under threat. You can approach every situation and embrace it openly, and you'll find yourself in situations where you can do that more naturally and not be, pulled around by having to cover up who you really are. And I mean, I think that's part of the journey of our lives. Is we are on a journey of self-discovery, no matter what situation we are in, and we do experience situations that don't quite suit us, and that part of that experience of contrast that we have in those situations is it helps us to realise who we are, because we don't just immediately end up in something that is, oh, this is perfect. Often it's, this doesn't work for me, and it's that contrast. It's like holding up a mirror. We then begin to say, oh, this doesn't suit who I am, and then we start looking or finding the situations that do work for us. So it's by those contrasts that we actually discover who we are, and that's part of our life journey. I think that's the case for everyone. It needn't be as traumatic as it seems it is becoming for a lot of people, and certainly young people. And that was one of the reasons for the book and this work was, it just concerned me. I thought, this can't be natural. It can't be how we're designed to be, that it is so difficult. And I do think caring and serving for young people better is something to look to. I think it is harder for young people than it really needs to be. And if we had some really solid wisdom, that would help, because certainly I had that. And, whilst I went through all the usual teenage things and transitioning to adulthood, I had all this basis with me, and I just, that's what I drew on. And, it just made all the difference. So, I mean, that's the overall answer. But the Fuse program itself starts with those core values, and I go back to what the Sanskrit says about values, value. And doesn't, like I say, it doesn't mean you have to study Sanskrit. You don't. Just go back and find out what Sanskrit says about value, and it'll just put a different or a broader, deeper understanding of the importance of values in our lives, and getting those clear as a basis for living our life and building our life and growing in our life. It's very beautiful language, and like I say, Sanskrit means pure and whole and complete, pure and perfectly formed. So it's knowledge that's really useful. It's not remote, it's not complex, it's practical. And that's why the book has lots of exercises and examples of ways you can bring this into your life. And then we go from values into attitude. What is your attitude, and the importance and the power of attitude, and choosing a positive attitude? That choice in that regard is paramount. And then we go into focusing, being able to give your attention and not be distracted, and that takes practice. It's like a muscle. You need to practice. Then uniting, which is letting go of those divisions, finding the commonality in every situation, rather than just being stuck in a whole lot of division within ourselves and in situations. Find that unity in every situation. Then simplifying is letting go of what's unnecessary, and then energizing, which is taking creative dynamic action. It sounds like it's a sort of a long sequence, but it's actually, when we're confident, that is what is happening. We are connected with what's important. We have we've chosen a strong positive attitude. Whether we're conscious or not, we have actually decided we're positive in our attitude. We've got a focus. We're united and whole. We're not divided and separated within ourselves, and in a situation where we've let go of what's unnecessary, and we're taking action. And all those things, all those elements are there when we are consciously confident. And you can take on anything with that.
Awesome. Awesome. That's an awesome program. I hope people get this book, because you can benefit from it, really. So we're coming up to the end, so I just want to get a couple of things in here. So you have a monthly radio podcast.
I do.
Transformation Talk Radio. Where could people be able to listen to your podcast?
Well, you can go to my website, consciousconfidence.com, and there's a radio podcast tab there, link, and you can go and listen to all the shows. I do have a monthly show. I have 2 shows a month. And my current format is I actually take something from the wisdom tradition, a story, and I'll unpack that and bring the meaning out for people. Just keep showing everyone that this wisdom that's in Sanskrit is utterly applicable and practical and enjoyable, and enlightening and inspiring. And then I always give a practice that you can take away and try for yourself, so that you can experience this for yourself. And that is absolutely number one, crucial. Don't take my word for it. Try it yourself. And I give very simple practices. And then I have a mailbag in the second half of the show, and I get a whole lot of questions. And so I usually take some listener questions and answer them. So that's the format of the show, and you can hear all of that from my website, consciousconfidence.com. And also my book. If you go to my website, you can get a hold of my book. It's available in paperback, ebook, and audiobook. Listening to it's very handy as well. So, yep. And there's lots of information about conscious confidence on my website.
Awesome. Well, congratulations on your book. It is an awesome book. You know, just talking with you also, alleviates some of my fear of of Sanskrit. Once upon a time I thought I would try to learn, but I was so afraid. But now, just how you break it apart and have the exercises and the information in it, it's so useful and it's so friendly. And I just want to tell people, don't be afraid of the word Sanskrit. Just go get your book.
Thank you. Look, thank you for saying that, because it is a barrier, but it can seem like a barrier, but it isn't. It's a real doorway into. And look, as you can see, you've got the book in front of you. It's not like there's great big slabs of Sanskrit. I just take individual words. What does the Sanskrit say about this? Here's what it says. Simple explanation. And there's lots of stories. There's traditional teaching stories, which is so powerful.
Yeah, it's a beautiful book.
Examples and practices. So it's user-friendly, I hope.
Definitely. Well, it definitely is user-friendly, because
thank you.
I would tell you.
Thank you.
So it was awesome having you on the show today, Sarah. And can you repeat your website one more time for our listeners? And I'll put it in the show notes as well once the show's up.
Sure, it's consciousconfidence.com.
Excellent. Thank you for being our guest, Sarah.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
You're welcome. And thank you all for listening to Magic and Medicine. Visit us at www.magicandmedicine.blogspot.com. Thank you for listening to It's All Good, Magic, Mysticism, and Earth Medicine. Visit us anytime at www.magicandmedicine.blogspot.com.